Seconds.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Adventures in .NET. I'm Christian Menz, one of your hosts. I'm back after a longer vacation, which was still too short, if you ask me. And actually working while I was away is my friend Adam Furmanek.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
And Sean will probably join us later today as well. And we have a very special guest today, Giorgi Dalakishvili. Hello, Giorgi. Welcome to the show. Thrilled to have you here.
Oh, and thanks for inviting me to the show.
Thank you for making it. One of the things we are, of course, always interested in is since we are adventures in .NET, what brought you to .NET?
Yeah, so it's quite an old story already, I guess. I started programming 16 years ago after university. So in university, I was learning C++. So I don't remember how, but I ended up on Microsoft's implementation of C++, and back in that days there was a version of C++ that ran on .NET Framework. It was called C++ CLI. So because I was more or less familiar with the C++ language, I ended up using C++ CLI, the .NET version of C++. And I remember that when I was looking up examples and documentation and things like that on MSDN for the .NET library, I was, by default, I was always getting on the C# page, on the C# version of that class. So I decided to check it out. What's this C# thing, and why am I getting there by default? It must be some cool language if I'm getting it by default instead of C++.
So let me because I was not that familiar with C++ CLI. I still remember on my last day of university, I put my hand on the holy book, which of course is The Art of Computer Programming by Donald Knuth, and I made a few promises for my future career. And one was to only very rarely touch Java from now on, because there was lots of Java in university. And I mean, that was super modern, right? I mean, other universities at that time had some really old vintage stuff there. And the second thing I promised was that unless they forced me, I would never touch C or C++ again, because I kind of hit a wall, right? I saw my limitations there, and therefore, my personal .NET journey, started with VB.NET, right, and C#.NET. So I could skip the hard parts, right? I just could get into it. So C++ .NET CLI was that basically you had the C++ syntax, but you could leverage features from the .NET framework. Was that kind of
Yeah, it
okay?
was mainly targeted for interrupt scenarios, like if you needed to call some C++ code from your .NET application, it was a lot easier, and that was the main reason why it existed. I actually remember I was reading a C++ book which had, in the beginning, it had Windows API examples, then it had Microsoft MFC examples, and then the last part was about .NET, but it was using C++ as a language. So that's how I found C++ CLI. And then later I decided to learn C# because it was all over the places where I was looking for documentation. It was all C#. So I learned C# and never tried anything after that seriously. Yes, that's how I ended up in .NET world.
Okay, so then you jumped ship, so to speak, and moved on to C#. And what I mean,
Yeah, I did
since you
not
can do almost
look back.
anything with C#, what kind of applications were you then moving
Yeah, in
towards?
the beginning, I was building desktop applications with Windows Forms. I still like it. It's very easy to build some
Many people miss those days,
normal
right?
looking apps with drag and drop. Later, I moved to ASP.NET Web Forms and ASP.NET MVC and later some mobile development with Xamarin and .NET MAUI and to .NET Core currently. So
Full stack.
yeah, more or less.
So what's your main part of the, I can't say .NET framework, right? Of .NET, the framework that you're using at the moment. So is it like, everything, or I don't know, APIs, or
Yeah, it's mostly APIs. I don't like doing the presentation part. So mostly backend database access and the business logic, but sometimes I also build mobile apps with .NET MAUI. For some reason, I'm okay with XAML, but not HTML.
so does .NET MAUI work really well for you? Because I mean, we have guests at the show. Some of them, they were, super in love with the framework, but some was complaining about limitations and sometimes high number of bugs. I mean, my experiences are so, and I think with enough time everything can be solved. But I mean, what's your personal stance on that? Since so many are discussing this topic.
Yeah, I actually did only 2 apps, I think. So it was normal. Like I encountered some of the bugs, but yeah, nothing major that blocked me. But I would say that compared to what Xamarin was many years ago, it was very unstable and the experience was very not good. It has improved a lot for the last couple of years, probably since they joined Microsoft.
Excellent. All right, and you're also a very well versed extension builder. Can I say that correctly? For what's the best IDE for .NET development? Is it Rider? No, it's
Yeah,
for Visual Studio. Although I like Rider
yeah,
a
for
lot
me,
as well. Yeah.
for me, it's still Visual Studio, probably because I started it in Visual Studio 2005. So old habits die hard.
And I mean, yeah, you're right. And I mean, if you compare, today's Visual Studio with Visual Studio 2005, of course, that's also not one
Yeah,
milestone, but
they,
probably several
yeah,
milestones, right? Yeah.
yeah, and I'm a ReSharper user, so it may be logical to migrate to Rider, but I still stick to Visual Studio and ReSharper. I don't know why, but I like the environment. The debugger is very powerful.
Yeah. And it comes straight from the source, right? That's maybe also a contributing factor, right? And yeah. No, it's a really good IDE. And so you published, well, at least one extension that we noted. Would
Yes,
you like to
that's the
elaborate on
only
that?
that's the only Visual Studio extension that I have. And yeah, it's quite interesting, I think. It's a debugger visualizer for Visual Studio. So a debugger visualizer basically is an extension that lets you customize how you visualize some variables. Like when you hover the mouse pointer on the variable, you see the magnifying glass icon. Or for example, when you do it on a string variable, you can view it as JSON or HTML or XML. But it's built in Visual Studio. There is also an enumerable visualizer from Microsoft as well, which shows some fancy dialog for the enumerable variables. And what my extension does is that it shows the query plan of your entity framework query and the actual query as well. So you see the query of your entity framework for query and the query plan that the database uses to execute your query.
Okay, so let me dive into that. So as we all know, Entity Framework Core, right? Microsoft OR mapper. So basically, we have an API. We work with that API, and that then by Entity Framework Core is converted to SQL statements that are sent to the database, right? And the data that then comes back is somehow serialized or converted, transformed into C# objects. So can't I just see the queries being sent in the console output anyway?
Yes, I think not by default, but if you configure logging in your code, you can see the queries in the output window of your Visual Studio. You can also, during debugging, see the query string inside the debugger, the SQL query. So this extension takes it one step further, and you can use the query plan that the database uses. So if you have any slow queries, for example, and you want to diagnose why it's slow, it can be helpful to have a look at the query plan and see what's going wrong in the database side.
Okay.
So without it, you would have to copy the query from Visual Studio to SQL Server Management Studio or some other tool and execute it there and check the query plan. So it doesn't replace the SQL Server Management Studio, but at least you can have a rough idea of what the query is doing at the database side.
And you're not just seeing the string basically or the text information. You are really visualizing that, right?
Right. So that part is actually coming from another open source project, not mine. So I just took that open source project. The project does the visualization part. When you give it the query plan in XML formats, it turns into HTML.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Yes, that's the library that Stack Overflow uses on their Data Explorer page. If you have ever tried to run queries on this Stack Overflow database, there is an option to use the query plan as well. So that's where I got the idea that if there is a way to see the query plan in web browsers, then I could take it and put it in Visual Studio extension. And since the Stack Overflow Data Explorer is open source, I explored their source code and found how they do the visualization part. And it turned out that there is also a similar library for Postgres, which turns Postgres query plan into HTML. So my extension supports both of the databases. You can use the query plans for SQL Server or Postgres, which is I think it's becoming a lot popular in .NET world nowadays.
Okay. And so is that Stack Overflow library, was that like plug and play, or did you need to fork it, or is it kind of like an API and then that gives you something that's drawable?
Yeah, it does everything. It's a
Okay.
JavaScript library. You give it the query plan, the XML query plan, and it turns into an SVG element on a HTML page. You give the query plan and the container like div or something where it should put the generated SVG, and that's all. I did not need to dive into JavaScript.
Okay. Even better. So you implemented the extension, and then when you say, I don't know, please visualize the query plan, then you basically have a web browser control,
Yeah,
and in that web
yeah,
browser control, you render an HTML page with a div, and then basically say, okay, here, that's where you put the
yeah.
SVG.
So when you hover the cursor on the iQueryable variable, it loads my visualizer into the target process. So I have the active connection to the database. I can fetch the query plan from the database, and then the visualizer shows a web browser control in a window. The web browser control is actually the one based on Edge runtimes that is installed on computers. So it uses the modern web browser engine and not the old one based on
That's
Internet
where I want to
Explorer.
ask. You sometimes see that, right, with several applications, especially those that then open up a window to do kind of logging in via a third party, where you then get those old JavaScript error messages from IE7. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah. So the Postgres library did not support Internet Explorer, so that's why I use the edge-based web browser control, and I just render the well, I ask the Postgres or SQL Server visualizer to render the plan as HTML, and they do the hard part since I'm not good at front end.
So when I want to use the extension, I install it, and then I'm debugging an application, I guess, right? So I'm in debug mode, and when I hit a breakpoint, do I have a tooltip then, or a context menu entry, or how do I leverage that?
Yeah, you hover it on an iQueryable variable, and the magnifying glass that appears will have view query plan option, and you click on it and wait for a couple of seconds. It needs some time to fetch the actual plan from the database, and you will see a pop-up dialog with a browser inside it, and you will see the query plan rendered there as an HTML.
So what did you have to do to then implement the extension once you had the idea? How should someone start writing a Visual Studio extension?
Yeah, that's also quite tricky because Visual Studio has its own API, which based on its history has some tricky methods, I think. But thankfully there is a new Visual Studio Extensibility SDK, which works on latest versions of Visual Studio only. So that's why my extension works only in Visual Studio 2022 and since version 19.5, I think. So the new Visual Studio Extensibility SDK makes it a lot easier to build extensions and debugger visualizers for Visual Studio. It tries to hide the old comp-based API from you. Otherwise, I think I would not have managed to build it. So it was a good coincidence in time that that the Visual Studio version that supports the new SDK was going live in a month after I published this extension. So with this SDK, it's actually a lot easier. Well, I have not written an extension with an older version of their SDK, but when I looked at the docs, I did not want to try that old API. So the new SDK is a lot more user friendly.
So that SDK, is that then a C# SDK or C++, or what language bindings does it have?
It's C# SDK, and it tries to abstract the inner workings of old API, I guess, and it's much more developer friendly, and they have samples, they have documentation, and the team behind it is also very friendly. Well, when I started building it, I had some issue showing the web browser control inside the dialog, and one of their team members was very helpful in resolving the issue and getting it to work.
So that's super helpful, because I have always maximum respect for extension authors, right? Because it's just a different type of application. You don't just write the application for the application's sake and the functionality, but you also have to integrate with a system that, especially in the case of Visual Studio, I mean, is probably backwards compatible until I don't know, 20th century, and therefore I think it's quite an achievement. So the old SDK, which you then didn't use, right? Was that also already a C# based SDK, or was that still C or C++?
It was. You could use it from C#, but
okay,
you
Lots
would
of popping
notice
top.
the perks and
Okay.
the old interfaces and things like that. So with the naming, you would have some interface and then a new interface with the same name and 2 at the end. So you would notice all the legacy of for the past decades, I guess, that Visual Studio has gone through.
Okay. Wow.
So
yeah.
The new SDK is a lot better, and
Okay.
it's
Let
a
me
lot
ask
easier to
you.
use it for building extensions.
Yeah, let me ask you, how do you integrate actually with the database? I understand that you run explain on the database. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Yeah.
So how does it work? So how does it work with the different types of queries? Do you support like create statements? Do you support stored procedures calls, other stuff? What issues would be faced with those?
No, it does not support it. Like you can't do a plan of if you are using some other library like Dapper or just plain Adonet, you can't use the query plan in that case, because it targets only entity framework at the moment. Like ideally, I could also build a visualizer. I could extend it a little bit to support SQL comment objects as well. So I would just need to fetch the command text from SQL command and execute it with explain, and yeah, that would work. The other limitations that it has is, since it only works with iQueryable variables, it does not support queries like first or default or those that return not an iQueryable, but just the entity itself, or if you have a query with count or sum or things like that, some other aggregates, it also can't visualize it because there is no iQueryable instance for such queries.
And I understand that technically you need to extract the query from the iQueryable, right? You just can't get the SQL statement. Gotcha.
Right.
And what about the databases? What databases do you support, and can you support more of them?
Yeah, I can. So the reason it supports only SQL Server and Postgres at the moment is that I wanted to have this visual way of viewing at the plan, but it's possible to support other databases and just shows the text output of the explain or JSON output of the explain. That's for example, MySQL supports viewing the plan in text mode. Oracle and SQLite also have the same ability, and yeah, for those databases, I could extend and just show the output in the text mode, and probably it makes sense to do something like that, because if you are using MySQL, that would probably be what you would be looking at, because there are some tools which provide visual view of the query plan, but probably most of the people look at the text version of the query plan.
Do you know, are there also visualizers for not just MySQL, but also I think SQLite, since Microsoft now has that in an option in Visual Studio for those, you know, scaffolding wizards?
Yeah, I think there is nothing like that. It just has text version of explain, so you can run the explain command in SQLite and get the internal query plan from the database engine. And also there was one idea in the GitHub discussions to use this library. I forgot the name, which allows you to build the visual graph. It's called dot something. You give it the dot file, and I think it's called GraphWiz, and you can it's for visualizing graphs. So you can probably turn the text query plan into some kind of graph and show it there.
So is this tool only useful for those that kind of understand query plans, execution plans already? Or does it give some tips and information for somebody that doesn't know really what they're looking at an execution plan, but it can say, well, this is good or not a great execution plan?
Yeah, no, it does not do anything like that at the moment. It just shows whatever data is returned by SQL Server or Postgres. The query plan that I get from SQL Server sometimes also contains information about missing indexes, but I don't show it currently in the visualizer. But
so you don't say this query has a lot of table scans in it. You may consider adding indexes to create seeks instead of scans.
Yeah, no, I don't currently do that. But I can show that if that information is included in the query plan, if I implement that feature. So sometimes the SQL Server query plan will include the information about missing indexes. So I could take that and show it in the visualizer window. But it's still probably you should still probably blindly create all those indexes and
yeah. Sometimes it's recommendations, it's tips or whatever. Missing indexes aren't really something you should actually implement, because you'll end up duplicating. You'll slow down your writes and deletes and updates versus everything else. So
yeah. So the recommendation that it gives is for that one specific query, but you don't know how it will affect your whole databases or your other queries. sometimes it tells you to include all the columns that you have in the index. So that's probably not the best thing to do. So yeah, it helps if you can at least understand some of the query plan and know how to read it. But so it's mostly for those people who would have copied the query from the output window and use the query plan in SQL Server Management Studio. It's just easier for them now. They can just use the plan in Visual Studio directly.
Okay,
and if they want to investigate it further, then they can always go to SSMS.
So what kind of things are you thinking about adding to it? Is it pretty in a good final state here, or do you have some things you want to add?
Well, many people have asked for Rider version, and unfortunately, I could not find the necessary extensibility points for Rider. Like Rider has its own SDK, and I joined their Slack for developers of extensions, but I could not find anything for building custom visualizers. Apart from that, maybe adding support for other databases would be the most requested feature. So to show query plans in text format for MySQL and SQLites, and yeah, that's all.
I think the at least some of the folks from JetBrains are pretty supportive on Twitter. So if you just, I don't know if you tried, but maybe they have some pointers in the right direction. But yeah, I think their extensibility system is entirely different from the Visual Studio one, right? Because of the cross-platform nature of Rider.
Yeah, Rider ships with its built-in debugger visualizers, so Rider supports it, but probably it doesn't support third parties because they have probably some more important work to do, and it's totally understandable. Like you can't build everything in one day or even 1 year. Or
Is there a VS Code version?
No, there is no VS Code version. Only the. Yeah, I have not received any requests for that. So
you might now.
Yeah, it was mostly Rider. Like everywhere I mentioned it, the first response was Rider.
All right. Yeah, so maybe one day that will be portable. But yeah, probably then you will have almost 2 code bases, right? Since the key aspects are the integrations.
Yeah, the integrations are not the largest. So the visualization part is done by external open source libraries for SQL Server and Postgres. Extracting the plan is same in both cases. So probably the integration part is like 30% or maybe even less. So it should be well, not easy to port it, but doable once they have the necessary APIs.
Excellent.
So you mentioned that you get requests from many people. I also saw on your GitHub profile that you are in top 1% on Stack Overflow.
Yes.
If you could share what brought you there, how often you visit Stack Overflow to reach these top ranks, and how does it go to be this, at the top of the peak of Stack Overflow nowadays?
Yeah, I don't answer any questions anymore currently. It was mostly in 2008 when Stack Overflow was new. I think most of the people can't even imagine that once upon a time there was no Stack Overflow and we wrote code without it. But I remember when it was launched, and I enjoyed answering questions. Probably also because I was relatively new to programming, and I wanted to kind of give it back because I learned a lot from different forums and different websites, and I just wanted to do the same. So through these years, the questions got accumulated, and I somehow ended up in top 1%.
We've had John Skeet on the show before, and he's kind of along the same lines. He started out really, going at it, answering everything, and he's kind of tailed off recently. So yeah, that is very similar for him as it is for you there.
I once had if I can tell it, I once had a really top rank at Experts Exchange, but that didn't get me anything, right? And that tells you how old I am, but different story.
Yeah, how many people were on there?
When you are
back then, a lot.
You are in this top Stack Overflow, does it help in your career? I mean, do people know that you are so good? Do they ask you about that in interviews? Does it bring any benefits?
No, at least not in my case. I think the fact that I'm in top 1%, but still a lot far from Skid, for example, it just shows how many users just don't answer any questions and only join to post questions. Like I have not done any analysis, but probably like there are very few percentage of some reputation, some points that are more than 1,000 or even 10,000, because like if you look at, like I don't remember how many thousands I have, but it's still a lot farther from the top 10 users, for example, like magnitudes of farther. So it shows like how many questions they have really answered, and probably if you take the top 1% users and do re-ranking again on those users only, I will probably be somewhere in the bottom. So
and now with things like Copilot and ChatGPT, the number of questions have really kind of decreased, because you can actually go out there and ask a question for those, and the first response isn't, have you tried search? They actually give you an answer.
Yeah, actually.
Cool. So
yeah, I think back in the day when I asked questions, I was getting a lot better replies than if I ask something nowadays.
Cool. So I can also see that you are an InfoQ editor. Could you tell how this story happened?
Yeah, unfortunately I'm not very active. I only wrote 4 or 5 articles for them, and kind of gave up. I wanted to get better at writing things other than code. So I found they had this program where you could join, and they would you would pair with their editor, and you wrote a couple of articles together, and I wrote several on my own. But I noticed that I don't really enjoy writing articles, unfortunately. Probably it's it's my fault, and I would have got better if I wrote some more, but I could not find the necessary will, and I could not persuade myself to write more.
Okay.
So writing code is more comfortable for me.
But you're also a blogger, right? So how is it different to write a blog post than write an article for InfoQ?
Well, when you are writing a blog post for your own website, it's a lot easier. It's the InfoQ. The idea is to write about some recent news and follow their style, and you have some rules to follow. And I'm not saying that those rules are bad; they are good for their needs. When you are writing for your own website, you don't care much about following any rules, or you are just writing for your own. And if some people find it useful and read, good. If not, that's okay.
If you like, I know many people would like to start blogging, writing articles, writing extensions, doing open source. By the way, I think you are also great in open source world. If you were to give like an advice to people who would like to do that but are hesitant and can't start, what would that be?
Open source projects, I just so my first open source project, which is more or less popular. I started it because I noticed that I was using the same code in different projects, so I decided to put it on GitHub, and thought that other people would find it useful. Like I did not have any particular aim to get rich by open source, because you can't, or to achieve anything specific. I just noticed that I was reusing the same code over and over again, so I just put it on GitHub and published it on NuGet, and it just happened to get some attention, and got 1,100 stars now on GitHub. So I would say just do it and don't obsess about what other people say or what they think, or they open issues and ask for features that you don't feel will be useful for your library. Just you don't feel obliged to work on those issues, because you don't have any obligation towards other people when you are doing open source. And some of the users can start to demand, for example, that you fix their issues or add some feature or things like that, and just take it easy and put something
Cool.
if you feel it's
Cool.
not something that other people will find useful.
I think that's a great piece of advice, that you don't need to feel obliged and you should just start doing it. So that is really good. So for anyone listening and considering this kind of opportunity in your career, just start doing it. And I guess it's now the right time to move on to picks. You probably noticed that Sean joined us in this episode. He was late, but maybe he will just begin with his pick for this week.
Yeah, I can do that. Sorry for being late. Dang, hardware problems. So my pick this week is the Ring stick up camera. I used to have just like trail cameras in the back of my house to pick up activity from like dogs and cats that walk through the yard, or raccoons or foxes or rabbits that we get in our yard all the time and things like that. But it was
Or the
kind of
Amazon delivery person, right?
well, they don't go in the back of the yard. They're out front. So my doorbell camera picks them up. And that was always a Ring doorbell camera. But I kept on getting tired of dealing with going out, get the SD card out of the trail camera, download it, replacing batteries and all that kind of stuff. So I picked up a couple of Ring stick up cameras that operate off battery. And so now I can just watch on my phone on my Ring app to see what's been out there and things like that. I can set up schedules, I can set up motion zones, things like that, sensitivity, all that kind of stuff. It's really nice. And then if it gets low on battery, I just have to pull the battery out and recharge it, so I don't have to deal with double A's or things like that. So if you want extra cameras around your house, try the Ring one out. It works well for me.
Cool. Christian?
Yes, so I have streaming pick this week, and I picked the fourth installment of Beverly Hills Cop. So our younger listeners probably won't even remember the first three Beverly Hills Cops. I think the first one was 40 years ago, 1984. And after a long hiatus, they actually, well, not they, kind of Netflix convinced Eddie Murphy and some of the other cast, or they convinced them, I don't know, to make a fourth installment. And it's always a bit difficult if you've seen the original movies when they came out, so you automatically have a positive memory. And actually, I didn't watch the old ones again, so I don't know how well they aged. But I thought they had were more charming than the new one. But still, it was, I wouldn't say mindless fun, but it's just it's good to watch. And of course it's also a trip down memory lane. And they are actually working on movie number 5, so Netflix seems to have a lot of money.
Yeah, so I watched it about a week or two ago, shortly after it first came out, and really liked it. It was good, but they licensed it from Paramount, because I think Paramount had the original rights, and so they did get the rights for another one as well. So, and I also saw that this one had 40 million streams within the first 5 days, which is pretty up there.
That is a lot.
And talking about the younger generation, my son was over here just before the 4th of July, and he's 29, never seen the original. We were going to start watching this one, and he says, I've never seen the original. It's like, okay, well, we can't watch this one unless you've seen the original. Yeah. So we told him, watch that, and then we'll watch the new one, so you can get some context. So
excellent. All right, Adam.
Okay. I will go with software pick as often. So you probably know Debugger in Visual Studio, as it was mentioned earlier. It's pretty cool, but it's not the only front end for the debuggers you can use. The other one, which is very popular, is WinDBG. And obviously the other solutions. So my pick for this week is X64DBG. That's kind of something between WinDBG and IDA. Let's call it IDA Pro. If you don't want to pay for IDA Pro and would like to try something maybe not better, but different, maybe will be more comfortable for you, then go for X64DBG. That's the front-end debugger for Windows platforms. So if you ever use WinDBG, you will easily find yourself at home playing with it. So that's my pick for today. And now, Giorgi, what's your?
Actually, I found couple of weeks ago Visual Studio extension that's AI assistant. It's called, I don't remember the exact name, but I think its name is Codium or something like that. It's like GitHub Copilot, but it has a free tier, so you can use it and evaluate and I'm not trying to advertise it, but if you want to use an AI assistant in Visual Studio and don't want to pay for GitHub Copilot or JetBrains AI, you can use the free tier of this extension. And I found it quite useful for boring stuff. Like if you have already written some code that is similar and need to write a piece of code which is different but follow the same pattern, then the extension can learn from the code that you have and suggest the implementation. So it can't write some custom algorithm for your own needs, but if you have some repeatable code with slight variations, it can write that easily. So that will be my pick.
Okay, thanks for this. Thank you, gentlemen, for all our picks. Giorgi, if our listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way to ask you questions?
So the best way will probably to go to my personal website at giorgi.dev, and there's a contact form there, which ends up in my email. So send me a message from my website, and I'll reply. Or you can also message me on Twitter. I will. My Twitter is twitter.com/Giorgi Dalakishvili. So you can reach out to me either on Twitter or on my personal website.
Or send pull requests to his open source project. All right.
Okay, thank you, Giorgi. And I guess that would be it for today's episode. You can also reach out to Sean. He is at the .NET Superhero on X, Twitter, and other things. I think it's Threads, but I'm from Europe. I don't have access to that, so sorry.
Now you do.
That being said,
you should.
Yeah. Or Zitter.
Today
that will be your tech pick next week, I'm pretty sure.
Now I'm swamped for a month going through all the threads I missed, no pun intended. And that being said, folks, thank you all for tuning in, and see you next time in Adventures in .NET.
Thanks, everybody.